Do English language learners face unique barriers to higher education? How can teachers improve college readiness for ELLs? Join me for the answers to these and other questions in segment 4 of the ADLET.org webcast, English Language Learners. Do English language learners face unique barriers to higher education? How can teachers improve college readiness for ELLs? Join me for the answers to these and other questions in segment 4 of the ADLET.org webcast, English Language Learners. Hi, I'm Delia Pompa. Welcome to the ADLET.org webcast, English Language Learners. In previous segments, we've discussed building trust and connections with ELL families, as well as the components of good instruction for ELLs. In this segment, we'll explore ELLs and college readiness. Welcome, Kathleen, Deborah, and Susan. I'm going to start with you, Deborah, and jump right into this because I know you've done a lot of research on English language learners and college going. What are some of the trends in research? What are we finding out about English language learners in higher education?
Well, first, I think it's part of the work I've done is really trying to separate English language learners from students, like Latino students, and we do a lot of work on both of them because they're so important. But what we've seen is that, 18% of Latino students are English language learners, which means so many are not. So when we look at the data, we try to make sure we look at both components. I think it's too generally assumed that if you have a Hispanic name that you are an ELL. So part of that is a balance. And when we look at higher education, we see a couple of critical trends when we look at ELLs and also Latinos, actually. And that is, we see much more enrollment at the community college level. Fortunately, we are seeing more enrollment overall in colleges than we have in the past, as we've tracked it for the last 10, 12 years that I've been tracking it, between ELLs and Latinos. But community colleges, a lot of it, we've seen there is growing attention to engaging families and not just students, especially for ELLs. We've seen that, and that means, simple things like translating one side in English, the other side in Spanish, in the case that we've been seeing, so that parents get the same information as their youth. We often find that ELLs tend to be the first in their family to go to college. If they've been successful in K-12, jump through all those hoops, they still need the support in college, and we find that's not always as readily available. And so having parents get information and be able to continue to be advocates for their children, young adults at this point in college, is summarily important. And so we're seeing trends of that nature.
Kathleen, when should schools start talking to ELL students about going to college?
I'd say kindergarten, pre-KK, first grade, and especially involving the parents, because just from a cultural perspective, there's so much that we understand if we've been educated in this country of the preparation for going to college, that it really starts very young. And it's not just about the funding. It's making sure that parents have the same expectation, that teachers have the expectation, that the students themselves have the expectation. What am I going to do after I graduate from high school? Are you going to college? Yes. What does that mean is the next question, not only for the student who then needs to take the right courses in order to get to college, but parents really need to be talking to counselors very early on. My child is going to go to college. Therefore, it's not just about content knowledge and language acquisition. What courses does my child need to take? 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Is my child ready to take algebra in 2 languages, in English? And the answer needs to be yes, because we all know algebra is a gateway course. And so to start that conversation very early and the expectation very early, I think is crucial for English language learners.
We seem to be moving toward a curriculum that's college ready for everybody, but we still have college track courses in most schools. So, Deborah, what happens to English language learners? Do they have to wait until they learn English to take college track courses?
No, that's the quick answer. This goes back to how important it is that students feel they're involved and they're engaged and that they belong in the classroom. And that starts early on, I think is part of what Kathleen was saying. But we have to continue that all the way through, because to have a rigorous academic curricula, and to be able to participate means they have to get the rigor from the beginning and all the way through. And a rigorous college-ready curriculum does create opportunities for students who are English language learners, that we find ways, if we can make it relevant, we can make it appropriate, we can make it hands-on, we can keep those students engaged in college course tracks that we too often don't consider a possibility. And we as educators don't often think about it, but also the students themselves don't see themselves as college material because they think, you know, I'm focused so much on my language, I don't have the disciplinary knowledge that I need to move forward. And I think that is short-sighted on our side as educators, but we have an opportunity to make sure that we integrate curricular knowledge as well as language development and acquisition in a college prep coursework.
So I have to ask you, you said too often kids don't take the college track courses who are ELLs. Is that a big issue? And if it is, how do we handle that? What do we do about it?
I do think it is a big issue, and I think it relates to expectations on the student side, on the parent side, on the school side, the teacher sides overall, and it's become more and more of an issue because I think as I look at the data, we should be seeing more and more of our English language learners in college than we are seeing even now. And when we look at statistics in states that have large concentrations like California, like Texas, like Arizona, the lost potential of intelligent young people in our colleges and therefore in our the human capital of this country is something that we should not be just disregarding as easily as we are. And I think part of that challenge means that we've got to pay attention to where our students, our ELLs are today, where they are in their course taking, and how we can find ways to get them into those tracks that are going to make them college ready. It's in the level of intentionality that I think can be intimidating, but it requires time and effort. But I think there are many teachers that feel that responsibility and are just looking for that extra push so that they can be intentional in making sure our students get the education they need.
Clearly, instruction is key here, Susan, but what are some other supports that could help kids, ELL kids, along this route to college?
Well, I found that as their ESL teacher, I was the person they'd come to, and I didn't know. So I had to learn very quickly what gets them in there. And one thing was collaborating with the guidance counselor and ensuring that the students were scheduled for classes that would help prepare them for college. And that didn't mean they had to be AP classes or honors classes. Not every student needs that to gain access to college. So it's understanding that they meet the requirements for graduating high school and then letting them know what they need to do for the application aspect of it. A lot of information they didn't understand. What was the difference between 2-year and 4-year colleges and what certain terminology went. So helping prepare them really was a lot of the work that I was able to do with them.
Are there other support systems that kick in at that point? Can they get help from other students? Is there tutoring or mentoring that is necessary?
Yes, again, because they were taking these courses that would help them to graduate and then go into college, I was able to work with service groups, National Honor Society or Key Club, who needed to have service learning hours to help them. And these were offered during the school day, and they were free, or they could be done after school. And what was nice about that is I did provide some training, so they understood the language acquisition process, how to help these students. Don't give them the answer, that's not tutoring. And then I also found, and what these students shared with me after was, it was a mutually beneficial process or endeavor, that they learned just as much as the ELLs did. Also, I would find that perhaps the English-speaking student was really good in English, so they helped the student with their essays or English or vocabulary, but the ELL was really good in math and was able to turn around and help the English speaker with their math class.
Well, one of the biggest impediments to getting into college for an English language learner, I would think, is dropping out of high school, and so many of them do. Deborah, what can we do about that? That's a huge question, I know, but give us a few things.
Well, you know, going back to what we can do in the classroom, it really does require that we make the students feel engaged, and we make their academic experience relevant and appropriate. It sounds simplistic in so many ways, but we find there are critical points along the educational continuum where we lose our students. and students who have so much potential. And what it takes is sometimes simple as taking ownership of the students that are there and making sure that we link to the opportunities, kind of what you shared as well, but also making sure that they are engaged with their own learning process, maybe with peers, maybe with others in other classes, maybe with their faculty member. Sometimes that means bringing in community-based organizations and helping along. But I think to keep your eye on the prize, that we know what the implications of dropping out of high school are for our students. In some ways, many more than the students themselves, who are living in the moment and don't necessarily see what the implications are. And I think the onus is therefore on us as the adults in that environment to make sure we make them feel like their education is important, that this has value and contribution. I think, and that they feel it's a part of their future. And sometimes the onus is on us. There's onus on students as well, but they're taking our lead. And I think we need to make sure we structure our educational system and support to make sure they get that message.
And what about?
I want to add
I know all of us do. Let me just lead us somewhere that I think all of you are going. Despite all these supports that we have, and you've given us some great ideas, it must be really tough for a child who comes here from another country and doesn't speak English to struggle to learn English. He came in 7th grade and then get in the college track, pass all the tests. What can teachers do to encourage these kids or to keep them from getting discouraged, more to the point?
Well, I think it's a great question, Delia, because I was actually thinking when you were responding, the real key, I think, to ELL success, academic success, truly is the teacher. I think the teacher becomes the linchpin in this trajectory, so to speak, because the interaction is between the student, the parent, and the teacher. And that's the most important relationship. So regardless of acquisition of language, it's when the teachers are so well prepared and they know exactly, this is what I'm going to teach during this week, et cetera, and then brings the team together to instruct all students in the classroom with knowing where the student's going to go. Every student that I teach is going to college. So what can I do within my building with the principal, the school leadership, with the community in order to make that happen for every child that's with me 5 days a week? And I'd say for the teacher's perspective, at least 8 to 10 hours a day.
Like an individual education plan for them?
Well, and maybe an individual education plan, maybe the building does it, maybe the district institutes it. I know the governors are talking about it, that there's, a teacher who assigns a mentor that's a community mentor that holds the child's hand from the moment they hit the classroom until they graduate from and on to college.
There's so many ideas. There's so many things we all know we can do. I want to wrap up, though, by talking about one of the key persons in a child's life that all of you alluded to, and that was the parents. Deborah, what is it that parents need to know when they come to this country and their dream is that their child will go to college?
They need to know how to prepare for college, and at a very early age, what does that mean? We've advocated getting information into the hands of parents at maternity wards, at early childhood education programs, as well as throughout K-12, to make sure they get information that's very accessible and easy for them to understand. So preparing so that they know what is expected of their child academically is important. Also, how to pay for college. And I think those things should be concurrent, because too often we hear parents, especially if they're immigrants to this country, don't understand. We have a very complex system for doing that. But if we can get information early and often about the opportunities that are there, we know that ELL students are more likely to be low income than others. And that has lots of implications. We have good information that we can provide parents about how affordable and how possible college is, even if they are learning their English language, even if they are low income. That information is important. The third thing I would say is important is really understanding the differences in college choice. Most of these families have gone through a K-12 system where you don't have a great deal of choice. You go to the public school that's closest to where you live. College is a whole different dynamic, because you've got community colleges, you've got for-profit institutions, you've got proprietaries, you've got four-year, you've got universities, you've got such a mix and choices that sometimes it's hard for parents to understand. I often hear people say, well, often ELLs make poor college choices, because if they are well prepared academically, they could go to a more selective institution, but they're going to the community college. And don't they know that if they start there, they're not going to, get a baccalaureate degree or go certain things. And research in part supports that, but we see that there is still so much potential and
It's a
hope.
pathway.
And that's parents have to help their students, and often it's hard for parents because they didn't go through this system here. So we have to help empower them with that information.
That's a great thought, and thank you all for your very thoughtful answers today. I know we have so much more to discuss. But before we end, I'd like to get a final thought from each of you, something you'd like to leave our audience with. And we'll start with you, Kathleen.
My final thought is when I've had such an opportunity to work with ELLs, and not only that I'm a parent of 5 ELLs, and what's been important for myself, my children, and then other children and in non-English speaking communities is that education is their right, and that parents, really it's important for them to understand that it's a gift, yes, but education is the key to their child's success. And whatever it takes for their child to keep succeeding and staying in school, then it's important and incumbent upon the parent, not just the educators, but the parents to say, I'm not going to stop, I'm not going to take no for an answer, and we're going to keep all of our kids in the system and graduate them and beyond. And then to pick up the teacher and hold the teacher's hand and say, and you're my partner in this.
Thanks. That's so important. Thank you very much. Deborah.
If I had one thought, I would say we have to treat language as an asset. And I think too often we see it as a deficit to overcome a hurdle that we have to address. So I would say we have to see language as an asset, and then we build from that asset to make sure our students are the best they can be.
Thanks. Susan, wrap it up for us.
Mine goes along with Deborah's, so it continues that idea, and that's in the classroom setting where you're one-on-one with a student, recognize what your English language learner brings, and that the language is an asset, but they also have prior experiences and previous knowledge to celebrate that and really support them as they go through the educational process.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you all so much. And thank you for joining us for English Language Learners. To view all segments of the webcast and for more information about how you can help the teen readers and writers in your life, please visit us on the web at www.adlit.org. Again, thank you for joining us.
Funding for this adlit.org webcast was generously provided by Carnegie Corporation of New York. Additional funding for adlit.org was provided by the Ann B. and Thomas L. Friedman Family Foundation.